the aspect of fear has to come in. I don't think people are as fearful as they should be, because you don't want to reach a point of no return. Some of your governments may be more responsible for the climate crisis. What are you going to do about that? There are people here sitting in front of you who are affected by the people you elect's decisions. What are you going to do about that? Different communities have different roles to play. I'd say when it comes to the global north, if I was leading a conversation with them, I would talk about climate finance, because the science is really clear. You know who's emitting the most. What are they going to do about it? Because the losses and damages in my community are not my government's responsibility. They are the global community who has put those issues on more targeted communities when it comes to like climate losses or like hotspots for the climate emergency. It is not like our country's issue alone. It is the global community's responsibility to aid in those emergencies.
Hello, welcome to Earth Talk, the podcast for people and the planet. A space where we talk about global challenges from different perspectives, whilst we try to focus on solutions and reasons to be hopeful in times like these. I'm Leo Holldack, and thank you for tuning in. Hello, welcome to today's episode. Today our guest is Fatehma. She is a climate rights advocate from Pakistan. So thank you so much for taking your time being here. And how are you first?
Hi. I'm okay. It's a bit, very chaotic environment, but I'm enjoying it, so it's okay. But yeah, should I introduce myself a bit?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, sure. Hi, my name's Fatehma. I'm Fatehma Sultan. I'm a climate rights advocate from Karachi, Pakistan. I'm still based there. I've been there my whole life. And yeah, my focus in climate rights is more on how urban losses are affected by climate change, because where I'm from, it's one of the largest cities on earth. It's a 20 million plus population city, and it's more than most EU countries combined in one place. So a lot of my advocacy and what I do is involved in policies affecting urban communities, because Karachi is an economic hub of Pakistan. So yeah.
Okay, so for the people who maybe never have been to the city, do you mind to paint us a small picture how the place looks like?
Yeah. So a lot of the narrative perspective of Karachi is it's that an immigrant city. So after the British left in 1947, obviously the Indian subcontinent was divided and the emergence of Pakistan came. And when Pakistan was created, a lot of immigrant communities from around South Asia moved to Karachi. So Karachi is an amalgamation, and it's this point that a lot of people make. It's a cultural mosaic. So it has so many different identities and ethnicities and religions from all over Asia. So I think that's kind of how I would paint a picture. It's not a one ethnicity or one religion community, because it has 20 million people. It has people from
so
all
big.
over. Yeah, it's huge. It's insane. I don't even think I've seen all of it. And I've lived there my whole life. So,
I can imagine. Yeah. And I'm I also haven't seen everything from the place I'm from. And they're around maybe almost 2 million people living there.
2 million people probably live in the area I live in. So that's nothing for us. It's huge. It has 2-3 ports. It has a lot of urban cities. It's by the sea, so it's by the Arabian Sea. So it's in that peninsula. So it has a lot of seafood culture, immigrant culture. There's a lot of communities. I'm from multiple ethnic backgrounds in South Asia. So I'm a Kashmiri, which is from Srinagar, which is a place in Kashmir. Then I'm Punjabi and I'm Sindhi. So that's kind of my background. But in Karachi, the specialty of Karachi is that it is a place where it's so culturally diverse, and you can see it in its reflection. So that's kind of one of the points I always try to make very clear, because people don't have an understanding that Pakistan has such a diverse ethnicity, factor and spectrum. So I try to really make that story come alive when I'm talking about Karachi. So yeah.
I understand. And when you think about one thing, what is really special about your home, which fact would you maybe pick?
I feel one thing that feeds into hope is that I see a lot of, because I speak from a position of privilege, I don't think I represent most of the Karachi population in my status, but I think it's very important because I have a narrative and a place where I can use my privilege for the betterment of other communities where I'm from, I think it's very important for me to speak up and speak for the people the system has failed. So whatever systematic issues we have, don't do it to fix the systems. I do it for the people it has failed. So that's something I always try to make clear. And that does make me hopeful because I think I started my advocacy journey when I was like 15. I'm 19 now. And I definitely think my advocacy journey is not just about, okay, let's get public opinion. It's a lot about action and implementation and what policies can we make and what can we change in our own communities to actually get a momentum and make people also trust you, because when they see action, people will trust you and you have to amplify that action. So that's kind of like what I'd like to work around.
Okay, thank you so much. Just again, a question out of curiosity, like you said it's like a really culturally diverse place, your home, and I'm still curious, so is it like super hot there, or how is like the climate in your home, like how is the place, like what is special about this place?
I think especially when speaking about Pakistan is kind of home to every sort of geography on earth. So you've got your deserts, you've got your northern mountains, where we have like the second largest mountain on earth is in the northern parts of Pakistan.
K2, right?
Yeah, K2. So the Hindu Kush range, we have salt mines, we have western mountains, we have deserts, we have the sea. It's so rich like that, and I think it's so different. Like if I'm in Karachi, it's boiling here, it's probably snowing somewhere else. So people don't know that Pakistan is so culturally diverse in its like geography, and I obviously live by the sea, so it is relatively hot. And I mean, maybe 6-7 hours away from me in the upper part of the province, more into it, which is like a landlocked area.
Yeah.
It's like one of the hottest places on earth. It's called Jacobabad. It's not advised to live there, but a lot of communities do live there because they can't leave, and those lands are indigenous to a lot of like communities. So it's like one of the hottest places on earth.
And
I don't remember the Celsius in mind, but Karachi and places like that are just hot spots for heat and rising temperatures, and it instantly just dries out like communities and like industries that revolve in those areas.
Okay, so we are right now in Egypt at the COP27. Somehow maybe there's like a reason why you're here and you came here, and you also mentioned that you're climate rights advocate like for now 4 years, as you started your journey maybe when you were 15. So how came that you started being active in this field?
I think one of my biggest priorities was that I think I really like the idea of having a global understanding and global education. So a lot of my activities and advocacy work kind of splits into two, where I work internationally and I also work with local communities. So I've done projects with 350.org. I've done projects where FFF had this project where we were trying to get fossil fuel banks to stop global north banks to stop investing in fossil fuel industries in the global south, because it creates a lot of hazards for communities there. So I kind of break my advocacy into two. So it's a lot of international work, which is why I've become really involved in the international community, and I made a lot of friends and advocates in my cause. And I think it's one of the things from back home is that because I don't know a lot of people who are climate advocates back home, I know a lot of lawyers, I know a lot of journalists who are interested in what I'm doing, but I don't think there's a lot of momentum there the way there is in the rest of the world, especially like now you see that so many young Europeans are taking their governments to court in climate litigation policies and asking for implementation. It's definitely important that a country and a city as big as mine should be in that momentum when it's so highly affected. So I think that's why it was very important for me to be here. I mean, I sponsored myself. I got my sponsorship from my badge was obviously sponsored, but then I definitely didn't want to take up anyone's funding spots, because funding for MAPA activists is very restricted and it doesn't reach a vast target audience. So I made it a point to just pay for myself because I didn't want to take any other person's position. So that's kind of like what I went off.
I see.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned us that your home is one. There's like not much momentum like when it comes to climate activism, let's call it this way. And you mentioned, but this is like one of the most affected areas by the climate crisis. So in which way does the climate crisis affect your home?
I think also just addressing like the point of momentum, I think there's a lack of momentum because Pakistan's not even in the top 99% of countries globally that emit carbon emissions. So what purpose does it that schools are getting like greenwashed or having different industrial changes if the people and the communities and the corporations that are actually at fault not paying up for the mistakes that we're paying for? Like, why is my country's economy so bad because of a crisis that we did not even pay for? In a lot of places there are obviously two roles to split, and I think coming to my community, it's like, yeah, okay, if we don't contribute to the problem, how can we facilitate to avoid it? So a lot of the things that the youth here has kind of like collaborated on and understood is that there needs to be an understanding of what adaptation is. There needs to be an understanding of what loss and damages is. When adaptation mechanisms fail, that's what leads to loss and damages. They are not the same thing. In communities in Pakistan, adaptation methods failed, and that is why loss and damages were more. Yes, the escalated risk was way higher, but there needs to be support from the international community and mechanisms from like the UN to actually place adaptation and mitigation methods in countries that cannot support the level of fatalities that are coming in.
Sorry to repeat the question, but still, in which way is your home affected so much by the climate crisis?
I'd focus more on like the urban aspect because my home and like where I've lived it's a very concrete jungle atmosphere. So obviously when it's like overly raining, the city planning kind of fails and everything kind of goes underwater. And in that, there's a lot of issues. Like we have a lot of security risks when it comes to electricity because a lot of people like die through electrification. A lot of infrastructures get shut down. A lot of things break. And that kind of affects the entire cyclical nature of a city because if everything shuts down, industries and businesses will fail because people can't get to work, people can't go get a decent food to eat, food poverty increases, laborers are not able to meet their daily wages, and so on. I think that's kind of how it like affects my community because there's a huge urban aspect of it. So because it's an economic hub, if you even cut like 2 months worth of work, that's like millions of rupees down the drain. So that's like one of the aspects. And I'm only talking about Karachi. I'm not talking about the rest of the country.
All right. So maybe, I mean, it's like the elephant in the room here is maybe that you're from Pakistan, and Pakistan was like the last weeks and months like the whole time in the news because it was hit by such big floods.
Yeah.
And can you maybe, if you want to, I'm sure this is like a really traumatic and sad topic for you, but if you want, can you maybe share your experience how it was, and maybe also if also Karachi was affected by the floods, or how your perspective is on those floods.
One of I just remember like this one specific, obviously I speak from a very like privileged perspective where my home wasn't damaged and where I live wasn't damaged, but all the infrastructures around us were. So obviously I knew that, okay, it's raining, it's going to create a lot of issues for a lot of people and a lot of people that I know. So Karachi was kind of the place that was focusing on, even though a lot of city infrastructures were damaged, it was kind of a center where people were actually gathering aid to send out to rural communities and village communities. So like my grandmother like was just getting people to stitch blankets and just send them on trucks and food just so people could have something to eat. And I think in Karachi is definitely that the entire infrastructure of the city just gets damaged and nothing can happen. So people do die because of like the lack of I don't know what the word would be. It would be like safety measures in place. But because of the constant deaths in like rural communities, a lot of the Karachi community kind of just came together to get aid out. Like if you were driving on different parts of roads, you could see that there were like shelters like made. And people were just dropping off like bags of food and bags of like bedding and clothes and sanitary products to just send them. So that's kind of like how the city also came together.
I see. But maybe you can, like, for the people maybe who are not watching so much the news, maybe can you paint like a small picture of the scale of the floods which were happening in Pakistan the last months and weeks?
I mean, I can definitely, obviously there's two aspects of it, urban and rural. I think the communities were all obviously the most hit. It's also a point to note that like when I'm painting that picture, currently it's been like 2 months since the flooding ended, till since the rain stopped. But I think 1/3 of Pakistan is still underwater.
Still,
Still. And
1/3.
1/3.
Shit, man.
It's a lot of areas that were flooded. So I'm not talking about Pakistan. I'm talking about the areas that were already flooded. 1/3 still remains. So a lot of like the aspects are because Pakistan is an agricultural country. So if your agricultural lands are like flooded, that creates a lot of food poverty because a lot of the agricultural output is not matched.
Yeah, of course
So
not.
that's why our currency continues to devalue and our food market continues to devalue because the access to different materials has been disgustingly limited. So that's definitely like one of the pictures I would paint, is that even now, till this day, a lot of communities are still underwater and they have not had any sort of aid, or like they have had aid streamed in, but there needs to be a lot more done.
So I was asking earlier a little bit, so that you're now at the COP, and maybe there's like a reason why you're here. So can you maybe explain a little bit like how come that you're now here? I don't know how, I mean, we know now,
Yeah.
but what are your aims being here?
I think my aims being here is also one, it's like representation, and then obviously because of like how loss and damages was added to the agenda, I think it's very important to have voices from those communities present. And I really like to understand the intricacies of policy making and policies that affect my communities. Even if it's like a policy that has to be followed in most of the global north, it has a direct impact on global south communities. So I'm really like trying to integrate, understand the policies being put in place, youth representation in the conversation, and then also having fair representation from most targeted communities. Like I don't think, even though there are a lot of people from all over the world here today, I don't think it even scratches the surface for the type of representation that is needed from the global south.
I see. Maybe it might be like a strange question to ask, but how is it then for you being now in such a place and you're like surrounded by so many people who are so privileged, and then you're coming from Pakistan, and of course you're saying yourself that you're like a really privileged position at that place, but still now your country is one of the countries which are hit directly and the hardest by the climate crisis, and it is like one of the least responsible countries for this. So how is it for you then being here? Like, I mean, to see and witness this such big injustice, you know?
Yeah, I feel like there are different like takes on that, because I think when I see the global north giving platforms to people from the global south, I'm like, okay, the point is to change. It's not to ostracize someone or tell them, no, you can't be a part of the conversation, or like take a very destructive approach. I think my way of communicating with a lot of communities from around the world is that I think it's more about pointing out similarities and just sharing the fact that we're all human and building on that. And because a lot of times there's like this dynamic where there's a superiority complex over people from the global south, and I guess that's also like post-colonial effects. So I think it's very important to kind of bring yourself at the same level and have an honest conversation and just be like, we're all people, we all live in different places in the world, and we all like coexist together. Okay, some of your governments may be more responsible for the climate crisis. What are you going to do about that? There are people here sitting in front of you who are affected by the people you elect's decisions. What are you going to do about that?
Yeah, so true.
It's more about, for me, it's more about educating and learning. And I like to communicate with people who want to learn. Because there's a very clear distinction between people who don't want to learn. If you don't want to know, you're not going to know. But if you really make the effort to learn, there's no way that door ever shuts. So that's kind of like my perspective on it. It's definitely just about coming together and unifying and amplifying the global south. Like the global south community is always very tight because we understand the type of experiences we go through. And I think it's more about educating the global north on those experiences.
Yeah, 100%.
And involving them, obviously, in the conversation. And them involving us in the conversation. Because it's not us leading the conversation. It's them leading the conversation. So what are they going to do about it?
I see. So imagine that you would lead the conversation instead of them. What kind of visions do you have, or what kind of solutions do you have in mind which should be implemented now, which could maybe change the course of things?
I think the biggest point is different communities have different roles to play. I'd say when it comes to the global north, if I was leading a conversation with them, I would talk about climate finance because the science is really clear. You know who's emitting the most. What are they going to do about it? They need to do something about it. So that would be, or they need to, no, not or, and they need to pay up because climate finance is very important because the losses and damages in my community are not my government's responsibility. They are the global community who has put those issues on more targeted communities when it comes to like climate losses or like hotspots for the climate emergency. And it is not like our country's issue alone. It is the global community's responsibility to aid in those emergencies because it's very clear like who are in the top 10 most emitting countries on earth. It's very clear.
Yeah.
So it's like that's how I would lead a dialogue with the global north. But I think with the global south, it would be more about transparency, involving youth in the conversation, focusing on adaptation methods so that there are less losses and damages. And I just think it's also representation. So I would expect that from the global south.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And maybe when we keep on talking about solutions, for instance, what are your solutions you have in mind, or what is your vision for like a world you would like to wake up to?
I think it's also talking about like policies. Like you can talk about in the Paris Agreement when it comes to like carbon credits. Those policies in place are not facilitating climate justice. They're not advocating for communities that are most affected. I think it becomes very greenwashed because they don't carry a lot forward for communities. And a lot of the science shows that on the current stream of targets, there's not a lot of time left. And one of the solutions would be to also act with urgency, treat it like it's a crisis, treat it like it's an emergency. Because I think in the atmosphere here, it's not very... The aspect of fear has to come in. I don't think people are as fearful as they should be because you don't want to reach a point of no return because it is a man-made issue, but the effects of it can at some point like reach out of the hands of man. Like it won't be possible. So I think a solution would be to act with urgency. 2 would be to pay up and stop funding fossil fuels. Yeah.
For the people maybe who are listening right now, what do you think how they can support the best? Maybe like the people who were hit by the floods, maybe as like a closing question, or maybe just like hit your cause.
There are a lot of great NGOs in place that do a lot of funding in Pakistan. I think IRC is one of them.
Okay.
UNICEF is one of them. And you can literally just Google it, how to donate to Pakistan floods. And
True.
there are about hundreds of organizations that are trying to get global aid to stream in. I'd say that's one aspect because that's curbing the loss and damage. But I think secondly, it would also be getting involved in your own elected representation and making sure that they prioritize like not funding into fossil fuels, prioritize climate education, and prioritize amplifying voices from around the world. And also just cutting funds for cutting the funds of people who fund the destruction of other communities.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So Fatehma, thank you for your closing words.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work you're doing and that you're taking the space here and sharing your words. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.